Alright, so after a few months of ownership, I think I'm finally ready to give my review of the Yamaha FZ6R. So I think I'm finally ready to give a good review of this bike because a few days ago I got stuck in a rainstorm, really heavy rainstorm for about an hour. I took the highway most of the way home, and to be honest, the bike almost felt like it wasn't raining. It did a really good job, especially compared to my old bikes. You know, this did a really fantastic job holding up, and if the mosquitoes would stop bothering me, I could think straight. So, let me see. Mods that I've done, I did frame sliders for safety. I did the Marthy Viper exhaust. If you've seen my other videos, you know I did those. I put some R6 smoked turn signals on the front, and I did the integrated turn signal in the rear with a fender eliminator. So I mean, except for the exhaust, oh, and you know, the power commander to go with the exhaust. Except for that, I mean, the bike is pretty much just cosmetically modded. Out of the box, I was really happy with it. I didn't have to mod it, but you know, you don't even need the little extra bit of power that it gives you from doing the exhaust and the power commander. You always want it, but you don't need it. But the way the bike comes out of the factory is a really nice package. You know, a few cosmetic things to smooth it out. You know, I don't like the look of the frame sliders, but you know, come on, you kind of need some frame sliders. So I commute with this bike. I commute a few miles a day there and a few miles back, but this is my daily when it's not under freezing, above maybe 105, or pouring down rain. I haven't gotten it into the cold temperatures yet, but I assume it's going to do just fine. The bike is smoother and gets better gas mileage than any bike I've had before it, except maybe some 50cc scooters. I mean, there is a spot somewhere between about 6,000 and 7,000 RPMs where it gets a little buzzy, but really just go a little faster, go a little slower, switch gears, you'll be fine. People like to knock on the brakes. After having some of the bikes I had, the brakes on this are really good. I don't have a lot of complaints about it, and compared to my wife's new Ninja 250, these brakes are superb. As long as you have a set of Allens to get all this stuff off, the bike is really easy to work with. I guess one of the only negatives I can give it is that it doesn't have a center stand. I recently just bought this from Harbor Freight for 25 bucks and it's broken. So I really wish it had a center stand, but I'm glad they did the exhaust underneath because it's just, it looks incredible the way it is. One problem I had with my GS500 for whatever reason is it wasn't stable on the highway. I don't know if it's because it was a naked bike or because maybe the rear wheel was a little bit out of alignment, but it started to shudder when it got up to about 65, 70, but it seemed to do it more on the highway and less on the back roads. So maybe it was that wind protection, but this thing, I took it 45 minutes home on the highway the day I bought it. And up until that point, I was pretty scared of the highway from my experiences on the GS. But this thing felt solid as a rock. And I remember I was in 6th gear and some little old lady was stuck in front of me when I was on the highway, so I rolled on the throttle, passed her, got back in front of her, looked down, and I was almost doing 90. And it's just, the power delivery is so smooth and so linear that if it wasn't a relatively big, heavy bike, at least relative to the other bikes I've owned, you know, this would be a perfect beginner bike. But I know my wife was on her tiptoes on this, and the seat's all the way down, and I'm not going to lower the bike just for her. Also, she might wreck it. Bent bar end, missing a windshield. What I meant to say was this would be a great beginner bike because of the linear power delivery of the engine. The clutch and shifter are both really easy to operate. All the controls are very easy to see and operate. The mirrors, although they look dumb, and I'm probably going to get myself some FZ6R mirrors, they give you a really great view of what's around you and what's behind you. I know when I first got my GS500, I could only see my shoulders, so I went with the little round bar ends. So yeah, I absolutely love the FZ6R for everything I use it for. A lot of people say, oh, it's not a super sport, and it does a pretty good job keeping up, and it does everything I need it to superbly. You know, I'll go out riding 4, 5, 6 hours, and this thing holds up really well. The seat starts to get on you, I guess, around the second or third hour. Depending on what kind of gear you're wearing, the seat could get a little uncomfortable, but it's the best one I've been on. So, yeah, don't let anybody tell you that it's not enough bike or you should have got a super sport, because you know, these tires are going to last 2-3 times longer, and the insurance and the gas mileage on it is great, and the around town, you know, stoplights and stop signs, it's so much smoother than a regular super sport at the lower RPMs. So I mean, if something happens to it, I would take another FZ6R over an R6 or a Gixxer.